We're all experiencing increased worries about ourselves and about our loved ones. And many people are experiencing financial challenges related to disruptions in their work lives. People who rely on formal support services for activities of daily living or for medical challenges may be finding it harder to access those supports. So what can we do? We can support each other as best we can. We can try to maintain our activities and relationships to the extent possible by whatever means is available. If you're watching this webinar, you have access to the internet. Use it. Use it to get reliable, factual information and advice. Use it to access your support systems. Please do be aware that there's a lot of misinformation out there. So be very careful about the sources of the information you're getting, whether from the internet or from someplace else. The federal government has factual information and guidance, and we're sharing some of those resources in these slides and in the chat box on your screen. These federal websites are being updated continually, so it's worth it to keep checking back. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, is a great source for factual, updated information about the COVID-19 virus on their website, which is www.coronavirus.gov. The Administration for Community Living has an excellent website with concrete, practical guidance on how to keep yourself safe. And that website is acl.gov/COVID-19. Finally, the USA.gov website has information on the government's response to the pandemic and related guidance and resources on a wide range of topics, including health and safety, finances, benefits, education, and housing. It also has information on misinformation, scams, and fraud. If you need support in coping with the events of the past few weeks and your usual support network is not accessible or is not enough to make you feel better, there are crisis hotlines manned by people who are ready to help. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration has a disaster distress helpline, 1-800-985-5990. If you or someone you care about are feeling overwhelmed with emotions like sadness, depression, or anxiety, or feel like you want to harm yourself or others, please call the Disaster Distress Helpline, or you can also call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255, or you can call 911. There are people who can help, so please do reach out if you need to. Dr. Robertson's presentation today is timely given the impact this virus is having on people's current work or their preparations for future employment. And he will be talking about resources for help with that. You will find resources in his slides and in the chat box as well. I don't want to take any more time from today's presentation, so I will end with the message that we will get through this, and we will get through it best if we're kind to each other and supportive in whatever way we can be. Our team here hopes that you and your loved ones stay well. I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Scott Michael Robertson. Dr. Robertson, an autistic adult, works as policy advisor on the youth policy team at the United States Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. He previously worked as a Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Fellow for Senator Tom Harkin in the United States Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Dr. Robertson has also served as a public member of the Federal Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee and a council member on the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council. In 2006, he co-founded the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network as a national nonprofit organization and then served as the founding vice president. Dr. Robertson completed his PhD in Information Sciences and Technology at Penn State University after investigating cyber and face-to-face bullying of autistic youth for his dissertation study. So, Dr. Robertson, thank you very much for being here, and we will turn this over to you.
Thank you, Anne, for that great introduction. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear.
Because I know we are having a little bit of audio issues, and hopefully if folks are having any trouble, please message through the chat room. I did also want to reinforce what Dr. Wagner had just mentioned right now about resources that we have for COVID-19, and I want to say we are here for everyone out there and individuals and families that have been affected profoundly by COVID-19. And there are many federal resources that are available to help folks. And on one of the slides I have here coming up early on in the presentation, I reshare some of the resources that Dr. Wagner mentioned, and especially on the employment is that we're here to help folks who are displaced workers or displaced job seekers who are already seeking employment opportunities and now are finding challenge in the current climate. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that we show solidarity with folks who have faced major challenges in the COVID-19 environment that is happening right now. So this webinar is titled Expanding Employment and Career Pathways for Youth and Young Adults on the Autism Spectrum. And as was shared, I'm on the autism spectrum myself, and I'm an autistic adult, and I also have a lot of very extensive professional experience in this area for the last 17 years through the state and local level, nonprofits, and now in the federal government, previously the legislative branch, and now at the U.S. Department of Labor. Now having switched to our employment-related supports team, which handles healthcare, housing, et cetera, at the Office of Disability Employment Policy. One of my main hats spearheading what we do at the Office of Disability Employment Policy on national autism policy, enhancing neurodiversity in the workplace, and increasing opportunities for autistic youth and adults to secure gainful employment opportunities that match talents, skills, and interests. So I'm going to flip now to the next slide. Hopefully, just need to clear. Um, uh-oh. There we go. Okay. So as was shared, I'm a policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. The Employment Related Supports Policy team is the current team that I'm on at Odep. And my email address is robertson.scott.m@dol.gov. And you can feel free to email me about anything related to this presentation, autism, other facets or topics. If I can't answer them, maybe my colleagues can help answer them. And that includes if you have any challenges and barriers related right now to COVID-19 that are especially disability related barriers and challenges, ODEP is here to help. And again, I can try to help answer things or in concert with my colleagues at the agency. So during this webinar, I'm going to be sharing again some more the resources that we mentioned around COVID-19, including for displaced workers and job seekers. I'm going to be describing our mission at the Office of Disability Employment Policy and some of our core initiatives, highlighting how we're commemorating the 30 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the landmark statute that guides a lot of what we do in America, in addition to the Rehab Act, that offers the promise of economic self-sufficiency, independent living, and other aspects of equal opportunity to American life that people without disabilities have had, but people with disabilities have only um, had greater access to in the last few decades. And we're celebrating especially that 30 years of the anniversary of that law being passed. And I had the great privilege of working for Senator Tom Harkin, who was the author of the ADA. So I worked with him, as was mentioned, as a candidate fill in his last year. So the ADA is especially meaningful to me. And the hashtag is ADA30 for that. And then I'm also going to be discussing one of the main focuses of this is employment as a social determinant of health and its connection back to our health and wellness and quality of life, and sharing resources on employment access for youth and young adults who are on the autism spectrum. And as was mentioned, as folks are going along, if you're having audio issues, one of the suggestions was it might be easier to call in on the phone line. If you're having trouble doing the audio through your computer, the WebEx includes a phone number to call in. So you may want to try that if you're having any issues on the audio. And if you're having bandwidth issues, you may want to turn off the video too, because and the slides are which you primarily need access to for this presentation. So resources related to COVID-19, I wanted to share this up front at the beginning, so folks can realize that we have the resources and supports to help folks. For instance, at the U.S. Department of Labor, our website on COVID-19 at dol.gov/coronavirus has resources from different agencies on how folks are affected on employment as far as worker protections, what it means as far as your wages and hours, health insurance, et cetera, related to your work, Family and Medical Leave Act, and the Fair Labor Standards Act, and what the impact that means for workers who've been affected right now in the current workplaces, especially in industries that are significantly affected by COVID-19 right now. So you can go to that website to learn more about the resources that we have at the U.S. Department of Labor for workers who've been affected by COVID-19. And there was a quick question from the chat box on the slides, and yes, we'll be able to, after the presentation, folks will be able to get access to this slide deck. The CDC has a website on COVID-19 and health protections at coronavirus.gov, so I encourage you to go there for resources on keeping your own health protection and supports, as well as the Administration for Community Living, which is another agency at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, has a COVID-19 site on staying safe in your and ensuring that you can still maintain your health and wellness as far as the, access to community resources you need as far as food, etc., where you're going through the current challenges of COVID-19, as well as the USA.gov. There's a centralized website on our federal response to COVID-19 across all the agencies of the federal government. So that's at usa.gov/coronavirus. And additionally, Dr. Wagner had mentioned the disaster distress hotline, the helpline from the SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So that's 800-985-5990. As well as there are other resources we can share with you in the chat box related to mental health and wellness. And if you're experiencing any thoughts of suicide ideation or other challenges related to mental health, there are other resources out there for you as well. So I want to shift now to the mission of the Office of Disability Employment Policy. So we are the only non-regulatory agency in the federal government that promotes policies and coordinates with employers and all levels of government to increase workplace success for people with disabilities. And when I mention people with disabilities on here, I mean all people with disabilities. So we're talking about cognitive disabilities related to the brain and the nervous system, physical disabilities related to physical aspects of people's functioning and their mobility, sensory disabilities like deaf and hard of hearing, blind and low vision. This includes mental health disabilities, for instance, among cognitive and neurological disabilities. So all sets of disabilities. Odep we are there to support folks ensuring equal access to employment opportunities, and for folks who face challenges in attaining employment or experience, for instance, job loss. We strive to innovate better national policies and practices to increase opportunities when folks are in the job search, for instance. So if you go to our website at dol.gov/ODEP, you can learn more about what ODEP does. And I'm going to share on this next slide, I have some of the initiatives of ODEP. So for instance, our initiatives include the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN for short. And the website is askjan.org, and that it can be especially helpful if anybody's been displaced and is looking for work at other companies that are still open or have online services that are provided where folks can access employment opportunities. Jan can help folks with getting the accommodations that they need for the job search, for interviewing, and then the workplace itself, and that includes virtually. So, for instance, if your work is online or for telework, etc., the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act still apply to work opportunities. Another resource that I want to share in here too is EARN, which is our technical assistance center for employers at askearn.org. If we have any employers that are happening to be on this webinar, or any businesses that have been affected by COVID-19, that is a resource we have for small businesses, medium businesses, and large businesses related to disability-related focuses. We also have technical assistance centers, for instance, on accessible technology, our partnership on employment and accessible technology, and its Future Works initiative on the impact of future technology, which many of us have been experiencing recently, actually, with the changes with many of us who are fortunate, who are able to work from home. I know many folks are not able to because of their nature of work. And again, we have solidarity with folks who've been displaced because of that. And our Apprenticeship Inclusion Models Initiative, which is a national 2-year demonstration project on increasing access to inclusive apprenticeship to support career pathways for youth and adults with disabilities. And two of those companies that are participating as pilot sites for that, um, Microsoft and then the Healthcare Career Advancement Program have an interest and focus on autism and connecting it back to other hiring efforts and recruitment efforts around autism and neurodiversity in the workplace. And that initiative also includes Amazon, again, on the technology and then the Industrial Manufacturing Technician Program are the sites for increasing access to information technology, healthcare, and manufacturing careers. So I want to spotlight just briefly here the Americans with Disabilities Act and the 30th anniversary. And so we have a website here, dol.gov/odep/topics/ada.htm, and the ADA is in the letters ADA are in capital letters. And if you go to that webpage, you can find some information about the ADA itself, and we will be posting more information there and also having a separate ADA 30 web page. And you can also go on social media. It's the hashtag ADA 30 if you want to promote the commemoration of the ADA and share stories of how the ADA has been meaningful to you or your colleagues or other individuals you support or mentor. And the ADA, for many of us, including myself, has meant ensuring better access to economic self-sufficiency, equality of opportunity, full participation, and independent living. These are the goals that we had in the vision and the spirit in the disability rights movement that drove better access for people with disabilities in laws like the ADA, and pretty much go across a lot of the laws that protect the rights of people with disabilities. These are sort of the four guiding principles. And I will especially be emphasizing today the focus is around economic self-sufficiency and full participation and independent living for the aspect because all those connect especially to gainful employment opportunities and access for people with disabilities, including autistic youth and adults. And you can also see here a picture on this slide of the signing of the ADA into law in 1990. So again, the 30th anniversary will be coming up in July. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, depending on what our environment and atmosphere looks like in the coming months on ADA events. Obviously, folks will have to take things into account and whether we're going to be doing things face to face or virtual. But we will be commemorating the ADA no matter what in different forms and ways to share how much it's meant to youth and adults with disabilities to improve access to life opportunities, including access to gainful employment and the transition and preparation for employment, including for college, apprenticeship, other work-based learning like internships, co-ops, etc. So I did want to briefly define autism. I think many of you all on the webinar may have at least some familiarity with autism, if not in-depth autism from a lot of the participants on the webinar right now. But I thought it would be helpful to spotlight how we view kind of autism among my colleagues and folks we engage in collaboration with. So autism is a neurological developmental disability with an estimated prevalence of about 1 to 2%. So it's one of the most prevalent cognitive disabilities or disabilities that affects thinking, kind of learning, information processing in the US and worldwide, and has associated atypical learning, thinking, and information processing. And I say atypical because people who are autistic, including myself and many of my colleagues and friends, and I met many other autistic people from many diverse walks of life. Many folks experience very different challenges and difficulties, but also have great strengths, talents, and gifts. Sometimes they go untapped and that can benefit employment are folks that have differences but with the right supports can do great things on employment and the activities that folks pursue to attain a high quality of life, engagement and full participation in our modern society. And autistic people have challenges and strengths in a wide variety of areas because of the differences in the neurology, the brain, the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. So the major areas are communication. So that includes both verbal kind of language communication and nonverbal communication, facial expressions, body language, etc. Interpersonal interaction or social interaction and social relationships. Is executive functioning, organization, higher order thinking and planning? Is what executive functioning is sort of the part of your brain that helps modulate what the rest of the brain does. And sensory and motor activity. So both small muscle and larger muscle, so fine motor and gross motor, and sensory, so the sight, touch, taste, hearing, smell, motor movements like proprioceptive, vestibular, your sense of balance, etc. So vast differences in neurology is one of the reasons why you often see a lot of major differences in behavior as well. Um, Behavior is really closely connected to folks having differences, again, on learning, thinking, and information processing, which requires that we think outside the box on supports to make sure that folks can be empowered and succeed in life, including in employment opportunities. And what helps drive a lot of that work is the federal statute that we have, the Federal Autism Cares Act, which recently reauthorized in 2019, which funds research, programs, and resources to support people on the autism spectrum and families. So for instance, as one example on that is we have the LEND program in the Autism Cares Act, which is about supporting folks who have neurological disabilities, especially autism, in research and professional and policy engagement. It's like a training program on that end. And then there's also research dollars that go to a variety of different research activities, especially with our colleagues who are on this webinar right now over at the National Institutes of Health, that funds a variety of research to improve the life opportunities of autistic children, youth, and adults. And I say adults on here as I want to especially emphasize that in this 2019 reauthorization of this law, the Autism Cares Act, in the the fall when it was the reauthorization was signed into law by the president, it expanded the emphasis on supporting all people on the autism spectrum. When I say all folks, women and men, girls and boys, people from a variety of different, nationality, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, class, like every diversity you can think of on life is we're increasingly emphasizing that, especially with the fact that a lot of folks have disparity of supports and services, especially folks who come from economic disparity, different geographies. Women, for instance, tend to be underdiagnosed. So there's an expanding emphasis on making sure folks can get the full supports across the lifespan, all the way through adult life, including access to employment, the ability to live in the community, the ability to have housing and transportation, and have access to healthcare services, for instance. And these are all intertwined. As one of the things I want to spotlight when we come to the social determinants of health and employment is these link across each other. So for instance, you need to have good health and wellness, often to seek employment, and then employment supports health and wellness itself. And then for instance, transportation helps you attain access to employment and maintain your employment and maintain health care. Um, while for instance, some folks may be working online, I know maybe more of us are working online right now for those of us who are able to telework. In normal situations, at least when we're not going through what we're going through right now on COVID-19, is a lot of folks are work in person. Obviously some folks are still working in person right now, the folks at the power company, the utility company, the cable companies, the food services, etc., the civil services, different aspects of life, the grocery stores, etc., where they still have to be obviously operating, and a lot of those jobs are in person, and making sure that folks can have access to employment in different opportunities. So autism also means atypical processing of the world. And I have a picture on here of autism. It's not a processing area, it's a different operating system. So this is a t-shirt that I have, which I think it has a double meaning for me as sort of a technology geek, if you will. I often sometimes have to even emphasize to folks because some of the stereotype for autism is that many of us are only good at sort of the STEM fields of science, technology, engineering, and math, which is not true because a lot of folks also are gifted at, art, communications, etc. I tell folks that, autistic people are good in lots of different things. And I've known autistic people from different walks of life, including even lawyers, doctors, etc. Every profession autistic people can do, but folks have to find what fits their own individual gifts, talents, and strengths. And that's going to vary a lot for each individual and for each autistic person, and depending on their support needs and their support needs during the day for workplace, for community living, etc., and the different barriers and challenges they have and their strengths and talents. So you have to adjust, for instance, employment to fit the individual. And that may include, for instance, job coaching, etc., that can help individuals with being able to attain and maintain full access to employment. So I like to think of autism, as I say, as having that differences on processing just like a Mac computer, and how it's different from a PC. And Mac computers, for instance, are in a minority versus computers that are running, for instance, the Windows operating system are more in the majority, but now kind of interweave a lot more than they did maybe 20 years ago. So in a similar vein for autistic people, as we're expanding access to supports, a lot of autistic people have, and a lot of other folks with significant disabilities are attaining better access to employment opportunities, integrated community living, and for instance, post-secondary education and job training, workforce training to enable access to employment. So I'm going to flip to the next slide. So employment represents a social determinant of health and well-being. As I say, this is a bidirectional relationship. The association between attaining employment holds for supporting a greater, higher quality of physical health and well-being and improved mental health and well-being. And there's also connection between independent living activities and activities of daily living and employment opportunities that cuts both ways, that employment can support these activities, and also improving on your activities to support independent living can make sure that you can have employment. And that means, for instance, having a routine in your life, having transportation access, having support for your physical and mental health and wellness is very vital to attaining employment opportunities, as well as access to the healthcare services you need, and that's both physical and mental health. And often employment is how you attain access to that, at least in the United States. As many of you all know, our health insurance system for a lot of folks comes through their employment opportunities. Their jobs pay often for part of their health insurance, especially for folks who are working full time. I know in some cases folks can't attain access if they're part time and may, for instance, need to be on the health insurance exchanges. And then, for instance, workplaces often provide employee assistance programs or EAPs that help support folks as far as their health and wellness and other aspects of their full life and work balance, and also connect folks for resources out in the community and counseling, and different referrals if you need, for instance, in medicine, legal support, support for your family, etc. When you're going through for challenges. I know that the employee assistance programs, I'm sure, are very active right now, with folks feeling a lot of stress and strain as we're going through COVID-19 right now. And I know that I have personally on my end, it's been a tough time, so I feel for many of you all. The family business that had been started by my grandfather in New Jersey, it's one of the manufacturing businesses that's been affected in terms of it's not considered in the essential kind of categories. So it's something that's been on my mind emotionally, and I can relate to a lot of other folks if they've lost their jobs, or have other stress going on right now in terms of work with the situation that we have, because this is a really emotional impact for folks as far as going right now for COVID-19. And employment also fosters health and well-being. Obviously, for people who are autistic, people on the autism spectrum, it serves as a facilitator for greater quality of life. We know that from research studies in the academic literature on autism and employment. And it also supports training for vocational skills and employability skills or soft skills, which can facilitate improved mental health and wellness for autistic people just like other people. So expanding employment and careers for youth and adults on the autism spectrum, of course, is especially important considering this. And so to do that, to ensure that folks have better access to gainful employment opportunities so that it's competitive, integrated employment, we should emphasize strengths and talents of people and who are on the autism spectrum to drive greater access to employment and career development. So emphasizing strengths and talents and mitigating or trying to minimize the difficulties posed by challenges and barriers. So lifting up folks from what they do really well and honing in on that and aligning job opportunities to what folks do very well and what they're interested in too. And a lot of autistic youth and young adults and, you know, adults and autistic adults in general as well have focused interests in certain key areas. One of mine actually happens to be autism and neurological disabilities. That's one of the reasons why it became a large part of my career, as well as, for instance, one of my interests for a long time, all the way back since high school and college, was technology and computers. And now one of my work portfolio areas is accessible work technology, in addition to national autism and neurodiversity. So you can see really naturally that focus interests have great potential to benefit the individual and help them succeed in employment when harnessed and given the right positive support. And sometimes it may need to be expanded as far as if folks have, you know, more narrow focus interests. So for instance, I knew of one individual when I had volunteered many years ago at a high school who he was interested in drawing, but he only liked to draw one character from Sonic the Hedgehog. This is a video game that used to be on the Sega platform, and in that case, teachers had to work with him kind of on expanding his interests a little bit so that he could be drawing other things because while there are opportunities to draw video game characters, there may be limited opportunities to draw, say, one character from one particular video game, especially a game that have been produced many years ago. So in some cases, you may have to sort of expand the horizons of folks, or you may want to you may find that for some individuals where their focus interests are in one area, can help tap into other areas that are of equal strength. So for instance, maybe it's on drawing video games, and then maybe it's like, oh, maybe the individual also likes other things related to video games or similar to video games, animations, and maybe development, film animation development. So there's ways where you can sort of translate skills from what the focus interest that individual has and set them up for success in their through their vocational interests and preferences to succeed in gainful, competitive, integrated employment. It's also helpful to help mitigate the challenges and barriers that individuals experience through accessible technology, so making it cognitively accessible, for instance. So autistic people may have differences on information processing. So you may have to adjust the language that's presented to maybe be simpler and more direct. I know that especially a lot of folks I know with intellectual disability, including autistic people with intellectual disability, prefer kind of that more direct, simpler language, reduced use of jargons, etc. And make sure that it makes sense for individuals as far as their language comprehension of what's presented to them. Um, as well as assistive technologies. So for instance, a lot of folks use phones to kind of manage their day. Even the agents that are on smartphones, where it can like Alexa, Siri, those kinds of things. I've known a lot of folks where they make use of that to remind themselves of activities where they find it easier than using the visual software on their device and saying, something like, remind me to prepare for my class tomorrow, kind of a thing. This is an individual who's a teaching assistant at a university. And it's opened major doorways for a lot of folks where it may have been a lot more overwhelming. And now folks for these auditory systems for the agents can say, oh, just do that. And it's more natural language, so it fits for their supports. A lot of other folks may find other software that helps sort of scaffold their planning organization. There are sensory supports, noise canceling headphones, etc. Sunglasses, even if you need to wear them indoors. You need to listen to music to sort of drown things out and help with paying attention. A variety of different technological supports that can help in these areas, the motor areas, a lot of, and that's something if folks email me too, is I can also give some extra suggestions or can help if folks have questions about different types of assistive technology that can be helpful for autistic people in the workplace and preparing for employment in sort of pre-employment kind of opportunities. Other enhanced work-centered supports and resources, including job coaches, job mentors, buddies, etc., and adaptations to the workplace environment adjustments. So we've realized a lot more, and a lot of us already knew this to be true, but research is helping hone in on this in spotlight in the last few years, that a lot of the recent autism research on employment is about adapting the environment more so than the individual, making sure the environment can help ensure the individual can be even enhance their productivity, so be more productive, be more successful, perform better at their jobs. A lot of times autistic people, just like other folks, may struggle to be performing activities of their job because the environment is not a fit for them, or again, there might be sensory distractions or barriers that may be hindering them. Noises, etc., smells. Where maybe if they can be moved elsewhere, or for instance, you can make a reduced smell environment, it may help the individual perform that much better at their work. Or even sometimes if their job allows for it, depending on the nature of the job. Like in my case, I listen to music while I'm working on policy and practice, editing documents, presentations, etc. That's a large part of my work activities is reading, writing, presenting, etc., and analyzing documents. And it helps often to listen to music can help drive my work, and it's not going to be distracting to other folks because I'm listening to it on headphones. And then foster access to employment related supports like transportation, housing, and healthcare. Folks need to have access to travel training, for instance, to get access to employment. They need access to places to live, obviously, to ensure integrated community living and quality of life, but also for stability on employment access. And then healthcare from the physical and mental health end. And I especially stress on the mental health end because a lot of autistic people, autistic youth and adults have co-occurring depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome, and a variety of other barriers that folks experience as far as mental health related disabilities, which is a major difficulty for folks beyond autism, is these secondary disabilities, if you will, that a lot of folks experience who are autistic. The rates of all these neurological mental health disabilities are much higher among autistic people. The literature tells us that. So other supports for workers on the autism spectrum that can enhance performance, including trainings on autism for managers, instructors, fellow team members. Again, I emphasized already the sensory adjustments for the workplace. If someone's in a classroom environment, they're preparing for the workplace, apprenticeship, etc. You may make sensory adjustments for that too, or technology that can be helpful for individuals. Peer supports, including peer mentoring, mentoring from folks who are more experienced. I know that's something right now that mentoring has been vital to me lately, both from my own end, from receiving from support and guidance from mentors who've been with me, supporting me for 10 years or longer. And then I also do mentoring on my own end, and I'm mentoring a college student at my university, Penn State, where I got my PhD, who has been going through sort of his own significant stress and anxiety right now with the shift to online classes. So we're trying to make sure folks have good access to opportunities. It's just, I vitally stress that on the mentoring, the coaching and team buddies, even through kind of more typical times. I don't even know what you find typical, but it's right now is not really typical for the time period we're going through right now, is the mentoring and the coaching team buddies can be so helpful for folks to succeed in the workplace. Again, the technology assistance, the high tech on devices, et cetera. Sometimes the low tech. A lot of folks who need alternative communication may use letter boards, sign language, et cetera. And then customized supports, for instance, the scaffold things like planning, organization, and executive functioning. So a variety of support needs to make sure things work very well for autistic people, because the disability has such variance to it and a lot of related challenges that come from the diversity and diverse aspects of the neurological facets of autism. So I just had just a few more slides to have here to share with you all, and then we'll jump to Q&A. So one thing I wanted to spotlight is we have our Pathways to Careers grants that include students on the autism spectrum, and these are long-term demonstration grants at community colleges. We did not intentionally seek at these demonstration projects in Tennessee and New York State autism as a major focus. It just happened because autistic people were more likely to be going to community college, because post four-year college can often be more stressful at first, or folks had trouble in high school, for instance. So the numbers were much, much higher. And again, we didn't intentionally seek out and recruit folks, but it was just happenstance that at Pellissippi, which is the school in community college in Tennessee, autism was the most prevalent disability, even more so than learning disabilities. They're up to about 70% of participating students right now are identified on the autism spectrum. And Onondaga, which is the school in New York State, about 19%, so almost 1 out of 5 identify as autistic people. That was only topped by learning disabilities in that case. So community college is a major place where folks are getting not only a great education, but where you can integrate better access to work-centered focuses, career development, mock interviewing, so preparation for job interviewing, and other aspects of career planning and career readiness is something we've been building into this demonstration project. And again, I can share more in the Q&A if folks are interested more in this, or over email. I can share more resources in the websites that we have for this demonstration project. And then our Employment and Training Administration at the Department of Labor funded some grants for both for health information technology, which is a major growing sector of the American economy, and that included an autism-focused track for medical coding. So this is a $5 million demonstration grants over 5 years. And then our Next Step Job Training and Employment Partnership was another grant that was funded through the Tech Hire program. So the first one was funded through the American Apprenticeship program, and this second one, the Next Step one, was funded through the Tech Hire program for about $4 million over 5 years, and that had a goal of almost 500, so about 450 people on the autism spectrum succeeding and attaining better access to jobs in healthcare and information technology. And that incorporated boot camps for emphasis like workforce communication, independent living skill development, and employability skill development, or some folks also may know that again as soft skills, is known as both ways. And I just wanted to briefly share some resources, and then I will jump right to Q&A. Is we have a topic resource webpage in autism, dol.gov/odep/topics/autism with a capital A.htm. And then the Job Accommodation Network here on the slide also has accommodation resources for autism. The technology and managing the sensory and motor, executive functioning, social aspects of the workplace, and whether that workplace be in person, or especially for even more folks right now, a virtual workplace environment where you still may need accommodation to succeed well in your job, and supports that may be able to help you at home or at a distance. And then interviewing tips for autistic people who are seeking job opportunities right now. There's a Jan article for that. And as well as Odep has resources for youth in general. We have a guide for self-disclosure called the 411 Guide on Disability Disclosure and Self-Identification, a soft skills guide for mastering soft skills for their workplace success, and resources at apprenticeship.gov where you can locate local apprenticeship resources, and a topic resource webpage on apprenticeship. So I'd like to switch to Q&A.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you so very, very much. So people can put their questions into chat. We've had a couple. We've had a comment and a question. And the comment is just support of community college, that it's cost effective. It's a good way for people who are managing other things in their life to get an education. So a lot of support for community college. There's a specific question which raises maybe a broader question that you could answer, both the specific and the broader one, Dr. Robertson. And the specific question is apparently from someone who's working at the university in Puerto Rico. And the question is whether and where they can find resources for a group of Hispanic citizens in Puerto Rico. That's the specific question, and I think it raises sort of a broader question, which is, do some of these resources that you're giving people, will they lead to ways that they can find out about local resources? I think you're muted, Scott.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Dr. Wagner. that was a good question about resources locally. So for instance, the apprenticeship.gov, you can go on there and put in your zip code actually and find local apprenticeship opportunities. And a lot of our other pages also have local resources, including some of the other pages at dol.gov. But also, if you need something specific to your locality or state and you're not finding it right now, if you email me and I can, here, I'll flip to my email address on the slides too. My email address is robertson.scott.m@dol.gov. If you're not finding something to your local area or your state or locality, I can help you point you in the right direction, or you can also call Odep as an 866 Odep DOL is our phone number, so 866 Odep DOL, or odep@dol.gov if you want to contact us at Odep to find out things that may be helpful for your local area. As far as resources for folks who are Hispanic or Latin American in the United States. The one of the resources that may be helpful on that, as far as I know, we haven't developed as extensive resources, although I think it's starting to grow, for folks who come from diverse race and ethnicity in the United States as far as autism, and a lot of folks are more likely to be underdiagnosed or not diagnosed with autism if they come from diverse race ethnicity. We know that from the literature already. There actually is a resource network in Chicago that may be helpful for our Puerto Rico folks that is a network of folks who are Hispanic and Latin and from in the greater Chicago area that I happened to meet recently when I was at a conference in the Chicago area. And they have, I think it's about 500 families or so, and they're supporting them on the autism end, including some folks have children who are youth or young adults or adults who are a little bit older than young adult age. So maybe they can cross connect and share with you what they've been doing as far as resources. I can, after the webinar, if you can put your email address for the individual from Puerto Rico, I can connect you with their webpage at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and their email address if you want to get in touch with them, and maybe they can help you with growing resources as far as on the support for folks who are Hispanic, or for folks from other diverse race and ethnicity and other underrepresented racial ethnic minority groups in the United States. I know it's something that we need to do a better job of improving opportunities for folks who come from diverse race, ethnicity, and nationality in the States, along with socioeconomic status and diversity of geography, is we need to do better on that in the autism community. So I hope that helps answer that question.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. That's really helpful. People are asking if we will provide slides, and we will. We'll provide a PDF of the slides after the webinar. There's a question. Now I've lost it. Question about if employers are not providing accommodations to allow telework at home. Is there a way to remind them that they should do that? Or are there some resources for people who want to advocate for being allowed to work from home remotely?
Yeah, that's a good question. And right before I address it, I should also mention that the Chicago group also presented, it just occurred to me, presented at a previous IAC meeting. So I think the video is archived online too if folks want to see what they had presented on. As far as if folks are not getting access to telework, and it would be a reasonable accommodation, like they could do the activities of their job at a distance, then yeah, they should be able to advocate that for the employer and request that as a reasonable accommodation. And if they're having challenge with that, we can share with folks afterwards. I probably should have had it on the slides here. Is that we don't handle that on the protection of workers directly on that if they're facing discrimination, but the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the Department of Justice handle that depending on whether folks are working for private employers, or if they're working for state or local government. I believe that's the Department of Justice that handles. But that's if they have an issue and it comes to a situation where they feel like they're being discriminated against because they're not being provided full access to telework. Now, I should preface this again that one of the things the employer may say is their job duties may not be fully easily able to be performed on telework, because that's the thing, is that the Americans with Disabilities Act, just like the Rehab Act is what governs us in the federal government, um, requires that for reasonable accommodations that folks still need to perform their core activities of their job, even with adjustments or accommodations that can help them perform their job. So that might be an argument that employer may make. They may not be, on the correct kind of end of things in making that government argument. And if they are discriminating against someone in that sense, again, they should be contacting the EEOC or the Department of Justice. I'll see if I can if maybe, at the end of the webinar, if we can get folks the resources for that. Although if you Google EOC, or again, if you're in state and local government, you'll have to talk to the Department of Justice. You can find the hotlines for that on calling or emailing to, and that includes not just teleworking, but if folks are facing other forms of discrimination.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robertson. Some more questions are coming in. Do you have some ideas about how four-year colleges can build pipelines with employers to support autism hiring programs?
Yes. So four-year colleges and two-year colleges and all forms of post-secondary education, it's been a movement in the last 5 to 10 years where there's been better on the collaboration and partnership and for employment and building more work and opportunities. And one aspect, for instance, since the question was asked on four-year schools, is often individuals for a lot of majors are required to do um, projects for their classroom, and often you can connect back to companies for that. Often that the companies want to connect to see new innovation and fresh thinking from students. And one of the things that the universities can connect to for the employers is there a pipeline of their new talents. In 30 years from now, whatever, I'm going to be retired or whatever, but students who are just going to college right now are not necessarily going to be, because they're a lot younger. So employers need to understand that as talent pipelines of talent and skills where individuals can enhance their businesses. Now, keep in mind from the employer perspective is they're thinking on the bottom line on productivity and performance. So they're not hiring out of charity, they're hiring out of it's going to make their business better. So you have to always be thinking about that from the university and as the employer mindset about how you are a source of talent for the next generation that can enhance their business, and that you have the same goals from the university or to your college end. Or for your college, for your university, as the employer ends, and how can you partnership and collaborate together to make that happen and be successful, and work out ways where your students can benefit the job opportunities there. And it could also extend beyond projects to internships, etc. There are a lot of ways, apprenticeship, you could be offering the instructional skills site for apprenticeship, because apprenticeship requires on-the-job training plus related classroom instruction. So there's a variety of different ways that colleges can be helpful for supporting better employment opportunities for not only not only autistic people, but other folks with disabilities and people without disabilities as well. And colleges are vitally important in that aspect of preparing folks and honing their skills and talents. And just the whole broader space of post-secondary education and training is preparing the future future workforce. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for that. So we only have 2 minutes left, and we have quite a few questions. So Dr. Robertson has kindly put his email address up there. I suspect he's going to be getting some email after this. But maybe a good one to end with is someone is asking you, what would be your top 5 recommendations to prepare teens for entering the workplace?
So that's a really good question. The top 5 recommendations for preparing teens for entering the workplace. One of the aspects I would say for a lot of folks is making sure, as the last question, making sure they get access to post-secondary education and training. So whether that, it doesn't always have to be a 4-year college university. Again, it could be a 2-year school. It could be apprenticeship. It could be, other credentialing. It could be, folks having also, job shadowing, uh, other ways they can experience what work is life, especially individuals, say teens in high school, need to have access to gainful employment, and what that's like in the workplace when they're growing up. There's actually reports that have come out there from, for instance, Drexel University and other researchers have discovered that individuals, autistic youth and adults who had access to paid employment are vastly more likely to have success in maintaining employment later on, have a much higher rate of employment than individuals who didn't have that employment opportunities during um, their high school years and right after their high school years. So just having that work-based learning going all the way through and talking about work even before that in middle school, et cetera, it's going to look different on the conversation with middle schoolers, but just even starting that career development conversation. Um, One of the other aspects is the soft skills end of things, is talking about what it means to enhance and meeting the individual where they are on the soft skills, employability skills end of things, and making adjustments as needed. For instance, on the eye contact, not a lot of folks, many folks may not be able to make um, perfect eye contact or whatever, may have a lot of trouble on that, and meet the individual where they are. Even though I will say our skills to pay the bills soft skills book does emphasize eye contact, but a lot of times I tell folks to, you know, just enable folks to disclose something like, I have trouble with making eye contact. It's a little different or whatever. If it's obvious to folks, like there's ways to share that if you have difficulties rather than trying to force something that may not work for individuals. Um, Making sure that folks have access again to the full technology resources that they need as teens growing up, become familiar with computer and hardware on the communication end. They can help them. Some of the stuff that's out there is actually not that expensive to help with sensory and motor skills to make sure folks can have a success. So folks should grow up all the way through middle school, high school, and beyond with technology that need to be successful. I can't emphasize that enough. One of the reasons I've been successful in my life is on the computer, and the computers have progressed so much in life is that folks forecasted when I was a kid and youth, the computers would be helpful for me. They didn't know how much computers would change, but they thought computers would innovate so much that they would be beneficial for folks like myself, and they were profoundly right. So I can't emphasize the technology enough to make sure that youth had full access to that. And then that full positive experience and mindset the individuals need from their parents, family members, and other supporters. It makes, the research shows that it makes a big difference in quality of life, employment opportunities, integrated community living, and self-determination and self-advocacy. If individuals have that positive mindset that comes from other family members and others that says they can succeed, set the bar high, provide supports, etc. I mean, challenge individuals to, um, you know, seek high in terms of opportunities in life, and then, make adjustments. Individuals have challenges, of course, but, be realistic in goals and outcomes, but allow individuals to pursue their dreams and vision, opportunities, and interests that they want to seek, to and flourish for their actual vocational interests and focus interests that they may have. Sometimes that gets pushed down for autistic people, but can also be a source of careers. And the literature is telling us that now too, is that a lot of autistic people, that's where our successes come for those focus interests that folks often describe as obsessive, but often in the right mindset can be a source of not only employment, but long-term career pathways. I don't know if that was fully five, maybe that was like three or four. I will say also, you know, um, making sure that it's not, helping the individual to be empowered, but also adjusting things around the individual. Because I would say meet the individual more than halfway is adapt things around the individual to make sure they can have success. Because autistic people are already learning how to adapt and cope all the time growing up. And just be able to get for the day can be successful and challenging for individuals even when they're working. At the end of a week, it can be a lot just to hang in there and to socialize, interact, etc. So just recognize that's what daily life is often like for autistic youth and adults. So for teenagers, be patient, be mindful of that, and just be continuously positively supportive and focusing on strengths for autistic youth. I hope that's was helpful. As I don't know if I got to five. If I didn't, maybe I can share some more over email for folks.
I think that was fantastic. And I think that's a really great way to end, because that was a sort of empowering and hopeful message to end on. So I want to thank everybody who logged on to this webinar. I really appreciate it. There have been some suggestions in the chat box. I think that we can end the video, but keep the chat up for a little while if people want to scroll through those. But again, thank you, Dr. Robertson, so much. This was incredibly helpful and incredibly timely. And thanks everybody who was on. And I sincerely hope that everybody and all of your loved ones stay well.
Yeah, stay well, everybody, going through this current challenges and the adversity we have, and stay resilient in in the face of the challenges. I know it's really tough emotional time, and our thoughts, are with everybody out there going through current major barriers and challenges with COVID-19, and I hope you all can, stay well and be able to hang in there as we're going through the current barriers and challenges, and we're here to support you in the federal government. And I'll see if maybe over email or something we can see if we can answer some of these other questions that came in. Again, yes, the slides will be shared with folks after this, with this presentation. We'll make sure folks get the slide deck, and I'll see if I can answer some of the rest of the questions that didn't get to be answered yet.
Great. Thank you again to our presenter, Dr. Scott Robertson. Many thanks to all of you listeners who joined us today. We will provide the slides from the presentation using the email address that you provided when you initially logged into WebEx. Also, we'll include a link to a participant survey. Your comments and evaluation of today's webinar is appreciated. Again, this webinar will be archived and posted on the OARC YouTube channel for future viewing. Thank you again, and this ends our webinar presentation.